The day is here. What's going on, team? Proof here. And for this video, it's going to be me showing my theory decks I did with chat back in May once JP got the limit break stuff for Spike Brothers. And like I talked about in yesterday's video, people wanted me to talk about it in May as opposed to talking about it now. So I kind of gave my thoughts and what I thought my theory decks would look like. I get presented two different decks, and I kind of gave my thoughts and opinions about what I thought the deck would shape up to be. But I did want to talk briefly about two particular cards that I don't think I touched on a lot in the making of the decks, and it's Deadly Dan and Deadly Phantom. And a lot of my talking is centered around the fact that I believe that Deadly Dan would be phased out of the decks in the upcoming set. And after seeing some deck lists and kind of thinking about it more, I think Dan might have a small place, not a huge spot, as a tech option going into the future. Because if you're playing a Deadly based deck and you're playing Jelly Beans, you can freely put Jelly Beans back and get the Deadly Dan back into your hand. And that means that you don't have to use Mecha Trainer's Counterblast skill to be able to search it out for you. So you have a free way to get Deadly Dan, and it gives you something to do in the early game if you need to, if your hand is kind of awkward and you need to filter it out to have some more action going on. In a different vein, Deadly Phantom, my eyes were kind of open to how good Deadly Phantom could be after doing my video with Different Fight and his deck list that had 3 Deadly Phantom in it. And it kind of operates in having something that can easily go back to deck and have you search out with Jelly Beans later. So you're more likely than not, or there's a strong chance you don't have to worry about not having Deadlies in your deck for Jelly Beans to find, as long as you can keep putting Deadly Phantoms back to search it out later. And I kind of glossed over those two in the making of this video, but I kind of want to keep that in the back of your mind tonight as you're pulling cards and making decks and stuff like that. Just keep those two cards in mind to see where it might fit in the context of what you're trying to achieve with your decks. But I hope you enjoyed the videos. I can't wait for tonight. I am going to be streaming tonight, or I'll be streaming during the day, but I am going to be streaming at the time of the launch of the event. So come check me out, check my link down below, and come have some fun with me, and I'll catch you there. Peace. Be easy. So now that we know what all the cards do, or at least have an idea of what all the cards do, I can add the cards to the deck and kind of talk about things without people, or with less people wondering what the card actually does. So, of course, the first thing I'm going to add are the PGs, because 4 PGs straight up. And now, for this THEORYCRAFT deck, I also had 4 Reckless, because with the end game sequence that I have in mind, you want to have at least 2 combination of Bracky, Reckless, and Juggernaut Maximum in your hand to combo with your Deadly Emperor. So you may as well add all, since that's the main game plan for finishing the game, I figured maximize those pieces first and go from there. And then we want to have something like this to fill out 13 with the Deadlies. And I'm sure you can already tell I'm going for a more Deadly focused deck. Now you could go 1 Phantom, 4 Daisy, depending on how things shake up, because Deadly Daisy with 9Ks, at least early on, can help you hit into 11Ks that receive a damage that aren't a trigger better, over Phantom with a 9K, because then you don't have to use the skill to lose the Phantom in the process. Because you can always get a Phantom either through Jelly Beans or Emergency Mecha Trainer if you really need it to get an on-demand 10K booster. But there is credence there to have 3 Daisy and 2 Phantom, just because you have the ability to search things out, and then you won't have to run into the chance of losing a Phantom to damage or something like that. So some combination of something like this, or whoa, not that, something like this. For the sake of this, I'm just gonna keep it like this and continue on. Dan be gone? Yeah, in my THEORYCRAFT, Dan's gonna be gone, because you're gonna focus more on just nice, steady damage and consistency leading up to your opponent being at 4 and 5 damage. I don't think you need that many Deadlies on grade 1. You can add Ganons for some cycling. My issue with Ganon is that if I don't see it early on, then it may not be very useful. And I wouldn't really know what I'd be trying to dig for. Like, it's cool to be able to to filter out, say, extra Deadly Emperors and draw into your Jelly Beans before they get damage checked. But there might be times where you rather not filter. So Gary Gannon could be kind of awkward, and I like having the excess Dudley grade 1s because just to have a better chance of always having a target for Jelly Beans going back to deck. Because then at the very least it becomes a net 0 as opposed to a minus to hand to put Jelly Beans back to deck. Would I run one less Reckless? I wouldn't, because I'm a big fan of, if my plan of action is to use the Bracky Reckless Juggernaut Maximum to be able to end the game if my opponent's at 4 or 5 damage, then I don't want to run less of that plan A for something else. So for grade 2s, start with our Bunny Boy Bracky, because it's part of our in-game sequencing. And then for Wakanda, because 10k vanillas are crazy strong and crazy good. And then for Dudley Douglas, because having Jelly Beans just grab you and intercept on demand is really good if you're trying to survive in the late game. And since after you activate Jelly Beans, it reshuffles itself, meaning you added a heal back to deck with a chance to check it that very next drive check after you grab the intercept from hand, means that you can play an intercept to soak a damage and then heal a damage to then have yourself have an extra lease on life at the same time. And you can kind of already elude or see the fact that I'm going to be making Jelly Beans in my deck my heal trigger, so that's really no secret there. Now for the tech slot, we have slim options here. My option at the moment is a 1-of Devil Summoner, because it might pull the Reckless or the Daisy or the Phantom or something like that and just give you a free body. It's really, in my mind, the best option of all the other cards. Like Olivia, we don't want to be using Soul. Spike Bouncer can still be awkward. Field Driller, we don't want to be committing too soon if we don't need to. And then Zachary is a 9k with small potential upside, but I don't think it's really that good for what we're trying to do here. Add a heal, took out a non-heal, which makes much more favorable. Most of the time anyway, sometimes I'm not that lucky. Yeah, but the idea is that you're giving yourself an increased chance, and Vanguard, you're able to manipulate the percentages, at least with Spikes, because you do a lot of filtering of taking the cards out of your deck, and now with Jelly Beans, a la Maximum, we can put cards back to deck. And that's why a lot of my success with Spikes in Zero have been using those percentages to the best of my ability and putting cards back to deck that you want to keep, such as your heal trigger Maximum, and being able to call those things back out later or check them later and give yourself just that little bit more breathing room. Because sometimes all you need is just one more turn to win, and having heal triggers that can go back to deck easily is one of the big ways to do that. I don't know how many times you've seen like 3 heal triggers in like your first 7 cards of the game, and you're like, oh crap, what am I gonna do here? At least with Maximum and Jelly Beans, you can manipulate that better into your favor. And then for the grade 3s, start off with Emperor, and then Jelly Beans here, which Jelly Beans is gonna be my heal for this. Emperor's I'm pretty much gonna play the standard 9 draw 4 heal setup. Now the rest of it gets interesting, because you have Safari, Maximum, and Skydiver, which all have principal, what's the word I'm looking for? They all have their own advantages to being in the remaining 5 cards of your grade 3 lineup. Now, of course, we gotta have the 4 Maximum here, because it's part of our in-game sequence. So here we have a Tech 1 slot. Now, the only real options to choose from are General Safari and Skydiver. And running Skydiver gives you a chance at getting an additional soul in here, which could be useful for our in-game sequence. Safari, on the other hand, gives you a much better Vanguard ride if you miss Dudley Emperor on time. On the downside of that, it means that you might, you can still plus off of it, but it may not be as useful now as it used to be, outside of checking a Juggernaut Maximum timely. However, with how precious our soul is, because we're not playing Deadly Dan anymore, if we check a Maximum, it's pretty much dead on board, because we won't have this free utility to put it back into deck, depending on how we want to line up our in-game chain. So for the way I built the deck up, I want to lean more towards Skydiver to finish up the rest of the grade 3s, and those are going to both be draw triggers. And I do know that maximum being a draw trigger is weird, considering how beautiful it's been for us as a heal trigger up to now. But I think the benefits of what Jelly Beans offers in the context of this formation offers you more benefit than what Juggernaut Maximum otherwise could. So I think it's fine like this. Since Jugs is not a heal, you can run less of him, I think. Like, you could in theory, but the way that I like to play it, if I have like a plan A course of action, I want to lean into that, at least starting out, because this is all Theorycraft, of course. And in my mind, if I want to have some combination of Reckless, Bracky, two of them, and Juggernaut in my hand, I'd rather run the full 12 allotment of them and give myself the max odds of seeing it over running one less or two less Juggernaut Maximum. But then I draw the one thing that I replaced the Juggernaut Maximum with when I would otherwise want to see it, and then be upset because my deck building choice kind of ruined me in that situation. That's just the way I feel. Since they're all going to be draw triggers anyway, you can kind of play with the grade 3 lineup a little bit more. Since like the core lineup for the grade 3s are the 4 Emperor and the 4 Jelly Beans, so you kind of have 5 slots to play with. Now, going back to grade 1s for a second, the issue that you kind of can run into is the lack of soul that you can generate, because of say things are flowing in such a way that you want to definitely set up for the Emperor combo. You need to have 2 on the front end to get the Bracky, Reckless, Juggernaut off the board free and clear. Now, if you don't add any other soul up to that, you're going to have 1 soul to use on your Deadly Emperor turn after you add to soul and call out 2 with his skill. Which means that if you call out a Reckless, or I'm sorry, if you call out a Bracky and a Juggernaut Maximum, if you don't check a trigger there, then you have 1 unit that can hit 21k plus in that situation. Which means that you probably want to save it for the Maximum, and then that way you can keep the Bracky around for intercept purposes and stuff like that. However, if you want to have more soul in your soul, if you want to have more soul to work with, you need to factor that into your grade 1 lineup more so, which means you might want to cut the Deadly Phantom or a Daisy or 2, and then add in a Medical Manager or 2. So, because if you have everything in your hand already, like if you have multiple PGs and stuff like that, you can use Mecha Trainer to just snap up a Medical Manager, and that gives you an additional soul, which might be the 1 additional soul you need to be able to function with the full formation. Now you can manipulate that, because say you're at 4 damage and you have 4 counter blasts to work with. That gives you 2 chances or 2 turns of Deadly Emperor's LB4 skill to add 2 cards to your soul. So you may not need the Medical Manager anyway, but this is only in a situation where if things get kind of funky and you only have 1 turn to use all your soul and all your cards to be able to try to finish the game, then you might want to have something like the Medical Manager. That way you're not relying on Skydiver hitting to be able to get you over the hump that way, if that makes sense. Or Rewrite Emperor. Yeah, or Rewrite Emperor. There's ways to manipulate it like that. Depending on how things shake up with how you play the deck, this Medical Manager might be an important grade 1 for you to consider. So you might want to go a Tech 1 here, and then 4 Daisy, or 3 Daisy, 1 Phantom, 1 Medical Manager. Like, 1-ofs can be kind of dicey in card games, but Tech 1s Tech 1-ofs in the grade 1 slot for spikes aren't as bad, because we have access to King himself, Mecha Trainer, to be able to search him out for us if we need to. And as Firaga was alluding to, you could also consider Gary Gannon as well for filtering options. However, in my mind, I don't think Gary Gannon gets better, or he doesn't meet his peak performance until Legion, when we're trying to sift our deck for Legion pieces, because that's where a lot of the combos come from. So I don't think he's as good now as he will be once Legion comes around. But you can always play if you feel the need to, if you feel that you need to have the filter option going on. However, as a Tech 1, if you're playing against Kagero, it's basically you get one use out of it, and then it's probably going to die. And that's another thing that leads me to wanting to play 4-ofs in lineups, because against retired clans, you don't want to have a lot of tech things going on, because once they're gone, they're gone. And you want to try to be as consistent as possible in case your board gets nuked from existence. So that way you can refill it with quality stuff. Depends on how hard you want to try and get your Emperor. Yeah, that's another thing, because with the way this deck is set up, you have one primary ride, which is Deli Emperor. And ideally, you just see it very early, and then you can just sit on it until Limit Break happens, which 9 times, or that's not even the right stat. Most of the time, that could be the case between how much you mulligan for it and then hitting draw triggers and stuff. But as we saw plenty of times in base set spikes, we didn't always see General Safe Read on time, which meant that we had to ride Skydiver, Maximum, or Unite Attacker. And in that moment in time, we were kind of a fish out of water, because a lot of our plays centered on early game access to General Safe Read, because we were trying to get the 2-for-1 action that General Safe Read offered us with the trigger into calling it out and being able to rearguard bust or something like that. Here, we're kind of giving way to that and replacing it with trying to be as consistent as possible in how we finish the game off, but the early game might suffer for that in terms of if we miss the Deli Emperor on time, what's our next best ride, and what are we going to do in the course of gameplay. Like we're going to be vanilla beats until LB4, which typically that's how games are going to be, because we don't have a lot of action stuff going on. But we can use Bracky with the boosters and stuff like that to try to push our opponent, and then see if we can get to Deli Emperor a little bit faster that way. But yeah, that's where Ganon can shine, is being able to filter you for a Deli Emperor. Just kind of give you a little more consistency there. But yeah, that's the first theory deck. Alright, so for the second deck, of course, you want to start off with 4 Maryland. And then what I had in mind was having some number of Reckless, because it's still going to be really good with Deli Emperor. But then, if we're trying to focus more on early game related stuff, then we probably want to put back in the Skydiver Assault Squad combo. So having like some number of Assault Squad to be able to draw it without having the need to fetch it is also really good. Maybe 4 Reckless here, because it feeds into our end game sequence. Then the question is, where does the tech options go into? Like, you could play, like, do you want to play Deli Dan? I don't think so, if you're trying to lean into Deli Emperor. Do you want to play Wild Hitter? Which I don't think so either, because it's an additional counter blast to have to take into account for things. Do you play Deli Phantom for the on-demand 10k booster? Maybe, because it also is free at the same time. Do you want to play Medical Manager? Probably not, because if we're trying to focus on Skydiver, then that's going to feed into our soul needs that way. And you would try to limit blind soul charging if you can. Are you going to play Wonder Boy to make better use of your 10k vanillas in your deck? Potentially. Or you want to play Gary Ganon for a filtering option? That's also another way you can go about it. For the sake of this deck, I want to add in a couple Gary Ganon to take the place of the Dans that were taken out of the deck. And then as for the grade 2s, for the secondary deck, we have 4 Bracky, of course. Then we have 4 Panther. And now from here, we kind of have a weird situation with tech slots, because this deck isn't focusing on Dudley, which means we don't have to play Dudley Douglas if we don't want to. So that gives you more chances to lean into other grade 2s, such as like 4 Double Summoner like we currently play. Or you can still play Dudley Douglas, even though it's going to be a 9k vanilla most of the time if you don't play Jelly Beans, which this deck currently doesn't in capacity. So you might be going just the regular 4 Double Summoner with a Tech 1 of anything else, because unfortunately Spikes didn't get a whole lot of good utility grade 2s in this first wave of or the first era, like Limit Break stuff era, until they got to Break Ride. Then we got like Dudley Mason and stuff like that. But until then, we don't really have a ton of good grade 2s that fill in well outside of the main ones. So you kind of just seeing where things fit, and Double Summoner would do decently well in a non-Dudley environment to make use of it. As for the last slot, like, you probably could make use of Field Driller. I probably wouldn't play it. I might just stick with the Zachary, which is something like that. Maybe Dudley Douglas, because there's an outside chance you could use it for the skills to get plus 5k late in the game. So it has slightly more upside than what Zachary could offer. Like, it gets kind of awkward after that. The high roll of getting extra Devil Summoners off Devil Summoner is always nice. Yeah, I can't deny that. Going Summoner into a grade 1 is like chef's kiss type stuff. As for the grade 3s, we have the core stuff of these, this 12 here, and then it goes into what you want to fill it in with, and the obvious option would be fill it in with the general safe read. So if you're trying to lean more into the combo, you have your assault squad here, and then you have your skydiver, which makes the base of your combo, and then you have 5 good grade 3 rides in Dudley Emperor, or you have the general safe read. And since you can lean more on the skydiver, getting you soul at some point, if general safe read does check you into Juggernaut maximum, you might be okay using the skill early on than you otherwise would be in the context of a full Dudley Emperor build, depending on how things shake out. So you cut out the Dudley package, and then you put in just the old combo stuff, and you pretty much just played the set 1 deck. And then you cut Dan, and then you cut out the rest of your safe freeze, and then the Tech 1 Unite Attacker that didn't do much of anything, and you place it with a better Vanguard in Dudley Emperor, and you kind of just go from there. So if you have most of the set 1 stuff, and you have pretty crappy rolls in the next event, and you don't get all the Dudley stuff, because Jelly Beans is triple rare, Dudley Daisy and Dudley Douglas are both double rare. So if you have bad rolls with that, you still can just make use of the set 1 stuff and come up with a deck like this, where you just still lean into the combo of Skydiver Assault Squad, aka Sky Assault. Zachary still viable to free space. It could be. The issue is it can be awkward with the soul setup, depending on how things shape up to then. But yeah, it does have upside being able to clear space if your opponent is at 4 or less damage. So you're definitely within your right to do something like this instead, or my current setup, which is 3 Summoner, 2 Zachary, just because the 9k is better. Now, something to keep in mind with the grade 1s is that 7Ks and above are really good in the context of making numbers with your 11k beaters, such as Skydiver and and Maximum. Say worst comes to worst, you can't line up Assault Squad with a Skydiver, and you're facing a cross ride deck. You want to line up your Skydiver with a 7k, because if you do it that way, then say the first Skydiver hits, you can still call something in front of it and be able to maybe hit a rear guard or something with whatever you call out after that. So call out, say, Panther, and pop at a rear guard after you deal damage to your opponent's Vanguard, because 7k plus the Skydiver makes 18k, which hits your cross-ride opponent that has a damage shield on it. So you might want to replace the Gary Gannon there with Medical Manager or Daisy, because she has slight upside to her, or Wild Hitter, because if you line up Wild Hitter with General Safe Read, you can turn 1 grade 3 check into an additional unit on the board. So things like that. But at the very least, I suspect that Dudley Dan's going to get the boot, which kind of hurts because I did enjoy Dudley Dan in set 1. It was definitely a beautiful card to have. But as I mentioned a lot of times before, I just prioritize the Dudley Emperor side of things. Being able to exchange 1 card for 2 is a huge upside, and being able to protect yourself, and while you put triggers back. Speaking of triggers, your trigger is going to be draw trigger, safe read, heal trigger, Juggernaut maximum, and then draw triggers for the rest of them. That way you have the same general goodness of maximum going back to deck, after you check it as a heal trigger, and then say you're on safe free and you check it, you can call it out, and then it can attack for something and go back to deck for a future call. Like, granted, you do run the risk of you cutting or grabbing a Juggernaut Maximum out of deck with Deadly Emperor, but I think the upside is just too good to have your Juggernaut Maximum as your heal trigger if you're not running Jelly Beans in the process. Yeah, if you have bad luck with your pulls and you get not a lot of generals, if you don't get a lot of Deadly Emperors, you just replace it with more general safe reads. That's really all you can do, because you don't want to put more Unite Attackers in there because they're just absolute trash. So yeah, those are the main 2 theory decks that I had in mind. I didn't expect this to go for an hour and a half. But everybody had some good questions to ask and stuff like that. When it comes to other starters, the next best starter is Thermidor. So if you want to put it as your 4 Vanguard or your 4 over Mecha Trainer, I wouldn't advise it, of course, because I think Mecha Trainer is the best one. But the second best option for starter would be Thermidor, because it combos well with Deadly Emperor, being able to clear that space up with any unit you might have. The downside is that if you're facing a retire opponent, then Thermidor can't get you any additional benefits really, because it's going to die before you get to late game. Unlike Mecha Trainer, which can be used early game in most situations to grab you something to make use out of it. So yeah, that's really the only thing I can think of. But yeah, those are the main 2 decks that I think I had in mind for Limit Break spikes. Granted, things can change as I get a better feel for things, but people overwhelmingly wanted me to talk about the stuff, the Limit Break stuff, so hopefully people enjoyed that, and hopefully it was useful information for people.